The Pentadot Infinimist variant looks like it's going to be the best Necromancer build that you can play in Diablo 4's release of Abattoir of Zir coming this week. Let's see how we can actually make this build so strong with starting out with the skill tree. We just need to have 2 points here in the basic skill category to actually advance further. Then you can actually see here on the skill bar, we don't even play a basic skill at all. And we actually take 1 point in Blight. We really love Supernatural Blight for 15% multiplicative damage every time we fight enemies in our Blight. Very strong, and you can see how well this is going to combo with all of the other stuff that the Pentadot Infinimist variation is going to give you. Then we want to have Hued Flesh, extremely important in this build because we have insane lucky hit percentage, and on top of that we rely on generating and consuming a lot of corpses with this build. Then next up, Blood Mist. As you can see here, we are reducing the cooldown by quite a lot, and we really want the Ghastly Blood Mist to produce even more corpses while we are in our Blood Mist. Then next up, we want to have Corpse Explosion, Enhanced Corpse Explosion, and Blighted Corpse Explosion to make our Corpse Explosion deal shadow damage. Shadow damage is going to be extremely important. Not only is it covered by Corpse Explosion, but obviously also our Blight does this, and that is going to proc X-Files Corroded Signet, because both of these are ground effects and are actually dots, and these dots have a 50% chance to erupt with the X-Files Corroded Signet and deal insane amount of damage. I'm talking up to 2, 3, 4, 5 million. We will see how far we can go, and that is actually going to be amplified even more by the new unique glyph. But I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. Let's continue in the skill tree. We do need Grim Harvest 3 out of 3 points because we need to fuel our resource to be able to cast the blights on all of the time. With 3 points here, we will very easily have full essence all of the time because our Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul is also continuously consuming corpses, therefore generating 6 essence all of the time. Then, while we are consuming a lot of corpses, we definitely want Fueled by Death to get that 9% multiplier on our damage. Then next up, a Death's Embrace is always going to be an auto-include in a melee Necromancer build, and as you can see here, we run 3 out of 3 amplify damage because we need our Decrepify. Decrepify is actually going to be extremely strong in this build. And this is because we have, again, a very high lucky hit chance, and Decrepify not only reduces the damage that the affected enemy deals, but also it has a chance to stun the enemy with Enhanced Decrepify, and on top of that it can also reduce our active cooldowns, which is going to be Corpse Tendrils and Bone Storm, as well as Blood Mist. Then next up, Corpse Tendrils, and we want to have the vulnerability effect of that and all of the points in this shadow cluster right here, because that's just more damage, more CC, more movement speed, basically perfect for the Infinimist variant. Then we want to have Standalone because we are sacrificing all of our minions, Memento Mori, to even amplify that effect, Bone Storm with all of the passives, and then Shadow Blight to trigger even more damage. For the Paragon board, it's actually really important that you choose the ranks right here of the glyph. As you can see here, we do have the Tears of Blood glyph in the Flesh Eater Paragon board, and you can see that there are going to be changes whenever it goes to level 50. Then the glyph is going to increase the radius from 4 to 5. Therefore, you need to do a slight amount of changes that can be viewed right here. And I'm not going to bore you with the Paragon board. If you just go here, copy this one into the game with the level 1 variant of your glyph, then you're gonna have a great time. And as soon as your glyph, the Tears of Blood glyph, is going to be level 50, then you come back and just adjust to the level 50 variant, and you are gonna be golden. There's just a little bit of variety in this Paragon board. I really want to emphasize that you have extremely easy to access all resistance nodes right here in the starter board, and on top of that also in the Flesh Eater board right here. You do have these very easy to access all resist nodes. If you are not capped for whatever reason, make sure you check those out. There's also some shadow resistance here, but you shouldn't really be needing shadow resistance. These 2 nodes right here can be extremely helpful if you are just below that elemental resistance cap. So definitely keep this in mind whenever you are running into the problem of not being able to fully cap your resistances. And for the aspects in gear, you will see that I have two variants right here, both of which are gonna be extremely strong, and it's just personal preference which one you're gonna like more. There is the AoZ focus variant where we play a focus to get more lucky hit chance and more cooldown reduction and a little bit more damage reduction from shadow damage over time affected enemies. And while we are doing that, because we are losing our lidless wall, we are gonna run skulls and we are gonna sacrifice our defenders. As you can see here, this will give us a full elemental resistance cap, because the sacrificing the elemental defenders is going to give us 32% all res, and that's exactly what we need to get lightning and cold resistance in this example over the cap of 70%. And then there's also the lidless version where we can actually sacrifice the Reapers to deal 15% increased shadow damage, which is actually increasing X-File. But to do that, we need to run 3 res in the jewelry, but we are obviously getting 713 armor from the lidless wall, and as you can see here on the defensive part, we actually have 13.372, and it looks like the armor cap that you need for tier 25 is going to be 13.2 or 13.4k, so we will get more information on that during the Abattoir of Zir, but this one is nearly perfect on the cap. And again, this is going to be the cap requirement for T25, and we currently don't even know if people can actually reach T25. Obviously, if you are running tier 15s, you don't need the cap against the mobs on the tier 25 monster level. So let's go through all of the other stuff. That's literally the only difference here on the aspects and gear. We can go through both versions because the focus actually has an aspect. As you can see here, we have the runic skull cap of the void to get a little bit more CC, which is actually not CC. The blight pull-in that you have with the void aspect is going to cancel every animation that a mob does. So you can use this extremely defensively. If, for example, there's going to be a charged attack coming at you, you can just blight the monster and it's going to be pulled in and the action is going to be cancelled. This is going to be extremely good, not only defensively, but also having all of the mobs pixel pulled and closer to you is actually going to increase your damage to those mobs, because you have way more lucky hit procs, because you have way more targets to actually proc stuff on. We really need to have total armor, max life, cooldown reduction, lucky hit chance while we have a barrier on this helmet. The cooldown reduction is extremely important if you are running the focus version, because with the lidless version, you actually don't need any cooldown reduction because the Bone Storm is going to be permanently active because of the lidless wall effect, which is not going to be the case on the focus version. On the focus version, you need to focus a little bit more on cooldown reduction to get that juicy Bone Storm cooldown as low as possible. Then next up, the chest with Shielding Storm. Basically, every Necromancer is going to run this. We need maximum life, total armor, damage reduction from close, damage reduction from shadow damage over time affected enemies. That's it. No variety here at all. You need to have these 4 stats as max rolled as possible or as high rolled as possible. Then next up, the gloves, very offensive with lucky hit chance, crit chance, attack speed, and chance to heal. That chance to heal is a little bit free for all if you like. You can also put a chance to slow, or you could also put stuff like damage to injured. You could also put all stats if you still struggle with some of the rare node breakpoints, strength if you need more armor, and yeah, that's basically it. You could also do like critical strike chance shenanigans. Don't do the shadow damage over time, because our dot damage is actually not the focus of the damage, because it's really the X-File proc that we try to scale, and that one doesn't have to do anything with overtime damage. This one is direct shadow damage and not shadow damage over time. And we want to have grasping veins on here. Then next up, a Tybalt's Will. I have been really thankful for seeing Filthy Rich play during the last campfire chat, where we actually got to see the Abattoir of Zir, and we actually understood that the defenses are not going to be as crazy as we thought we would be. We definitely can go a little bit more offensive than we thought 2 weeks ago. Therefore, we really want to include Tybalt's Will, because the combination with Tybalt's Will and Metamorphosis is going to give us a 40x multi basically all of the time on all of our damage, and is on top of that going to fuel our resource to cast even more blights. Obviously, as high rolled as possible, shouldn't really be a problem with how many Durils we are currently running. And then next up, this might surprise some people, but I've been tinkering with the boots slot for ages and I didn't know what to put here. Previously I had a shared misery boot with movement speed and resistances, for example, or corpse tendrils ranks, which sounded quite nice, but Griefs of the Empty Tomb are actually crazy. Not only do they give us movement speed and essence cost reduction, but on top of that, we get 2 stats that are not possible on boots otherwise. We get lucky hit chance with shadow damage, which is our main source of damage, and we get damage reduction from shadow damage over time affected enemies. Extremely strong for Infinimist or Pentadot, whatever you want to call them. We actually completely ignore the unique effect on those. If these could be rare or legendary, we would instantly pick them up, but they are a unique and you shouldn't really have a hard time to find them pretty high rolled. The good thing about this, it also has maximum evade charges, so you're going to be golden here with Griefs of the Empty Tomb. And next up, the wand. We really want to have all stats in damage to slowed and damage to close enemies. Now, previously, I had the damage to vulnerable instead of damage to slowed enemies here on Infinimist, but since we now know that the end boss is going to be 3 Bloodseekers, they can now be slowed. Therefore, we get a little bit more damage from going damage to slowed instead of vulnerable. As you can see here, we get like, what, 6% more damage. I'm min-maxing here. Yes, if you can get vulnerable, that's also going to be fine, because everything is going to be perma-vulnerable because you dash with your Metamorphosis through everything, but slowed is a tiny little bit better. And we want to have Ultimate Shadow on our wand because that ties the whole build together with converting our Bone Storm to darkness damage. Then we have one more source of darkness damage, again proccing all of the other stuff. Insane. Now, next up on the amulet, we have Blighted because that's an insane multiplier and we really want to boost that by having it on the amulet slot. And we really need total armor, damage reduction from close. And the third one is a little bit free for all because it's probably not going to be so easy to find this exact copy. The third one can be all of the stuff. As I said before, we figured out, or we saw that we don't really need as high of a defense as I thought. Therefore, I included the Ranks of the Gloom passive here, but this one could also definitely be damage reduction from distant, but even better would be damage reduction from shadow damage over time affected enemies right here. The rings here, Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul, absolute auto-include, same goes for X-Files Corroded Signet. Make sure to get a max roll X-Files Corroded Signet because there is actually a 20% damage difference from min roll to max roll. As you can see here, 37k to 44.7k, and we actually scale that number so high that these 20% become an insane amount of damage. I would literally tell you to forego every other stat on the, if you are comparing two X-Files Corroded Signet, if there is one that has a max roll, because this is our main source of damage and it needs to be as high as possible. Then the focus, we need 2 lucky hit chance roll, 1 wild barrier, then the cooldown reduction and damage reduction from shadow damage over time affected enemies. This one is going to be pretty hard to find. The most important stuff are the lucky hit rolls, but the 10.3% cooldown reduction is going to be necessary and can't be negotiated at all because we need it to actually make it work with a focus to get our Bone Storm back as quickly as possible. Then again, we do have the lidless version right here, where we would include the lidless instead of the focus and change the gems in the jewelry. For the class mechanic on the lidless version, as I said earlier, we are sacrificing Reapers to get 15% multi on our shadow damage, which is directly increasing the corroded signet damage. Then the sacrificing the cold for more vulnerable and sacrificing the iron for more critical strike damage. And if you are deciding to play focus, The lower two are gonna stay the same, but we need to sacrifice defenders for the juicy 32% all resistance. For the Vampiric Powers, we do have 4 Vampiric Powers locked in, and the last one being a little bit versatile, which I really like. So what is locked in? Metamorphosis, for sure. Every Necro build is gonna run this. On top of that, we need Prey on the Weak for Infinimist, because this is gonna be our only source of vulnerability when Corpse Tendrils is on cooldown. So this is gonna be extremely important to have that 20% multiplier all of the time. And next up, we do have Domination, also very locked in, as well as Sanguine Brace. Then now here on the 5th slot, you actually have tons and tons of options. As you can see here, I've put in Undying. I really like Undying because every time we are casting, we get healed for 3% life. And on top of that, our activations coming from the Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul are also going to heal us with Undying. And on top of that, Corpse Explosion has actually a very funny interaction. Even if there is no corpse nowhere in your range and you still press your Corpse Explosion, it is still gonna heal you. So if you are running out of health pots and you are running away from some mobs, just spam your Corpse Explosion and Undying is actually going to heal you by 3% every time you press a Corpse Explosion. But this Undying Vampiric power can actually be changed to something like Terror. I know we never really used this one during the season, but in Abattoir of Zir, it might become extremely nice because having a 14% chance to instantly CC all nearby enemies and give yourself some time to breathe might actually become extremely valuable when you go higher and higher in the Abattoir of Zir tiers. Then next up, we do have the Resilience, which is basically the same reason for Terror. Some might choose Resilience, some might choose Terror. This is gonna be a little bit more of a defensive version. Terror actually gives you a lot of damage multipliers because they are then CC'd and you can actually do stuff with the domination here. So these little changes here are gonna be really interesting and can definitely be changed on the fly. I suggest you try out Undying, Resilience or Terror and then stick with what you liked best. I'm really looking forward to take Infinimist for a spin as soon as Abattoir of Zir releases. This is gonna be my starter and hopefully I'm not gonna rip on it, so we can actually see how far I can go on hardcore with Infinimist or Pentadot, whatever you want to call it. If you want to see me struggle my way through Abattoir of Zir in hardcore, I suggest you check out the Twitch link down in the description or the pinned comment below. And if you like content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and I'll see you next time.